Thanks everyone for joining us today. Um, Welcome to the 2022 Lean in Higher Education Conference. This session is Progress, Not Perfection, How to Support and Coach Teams Learning Lean. And this will be run as a 60-minute workshop. My name's May Goldberg, and I'm one of the co-hosts of this session. To start with, I'd like to acknowledge the country on which we work and learn. As hosts, the University of Melbourne acknowledges the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander traditional owners of the unceded land on which we work and learn. We pay respect to the elders past and present and the place of Indigenous knowledge in the Academy. I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Some quick housekeeping issues, which you'll have all heard many times. Please stay on mute during the presentation. Please turn your camera on so that we can see everyone. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, and you will have seen that this presentation is being recorded. Now, please allow me to introduce the presenters of this session. It's our honor today to welcome Krista Schulte and John Hogg. Now, over to our presenters for what is sure to be a great session.
Thank you, May. And hello, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Nice to see so many familiar faces as well. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. Just a quick question, just to get your fingers working on the chat. It's what time is it? I've lost plot of the time. It's 6:45 in the morning for me at the moment, and I'm on my third cup of coffee. How many coffees, teas? If you're on the whiskey, that's fine. How many coffees or teas have you had so far today, based on where you are in the world? Chuck it into chat just so we know what we're dealing with. And I'll keep an eye on that, Krista, and I'll hand over to you to kick us off.
All right, thanks so much. I'm coming to you from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it is 1:43 in the morning here. So I'm afraid you're going to get a little bit of my late night scratchy voice after talking all day. But have patience. We're still, regardless of the time, we're really excited to be here, and we're glad you're here with us. So let's get started. Again, we want to talk to you about this idea of progress, not perfection, when supporting and coaching teams. I'm really excited to be doing this collaboration with John. It's been a lot of fun. I think it's one of the best parts of this conference is having a chance to work with others. So let's get started. We're going to be talking today about how we coach learners. So I want to start by asking you to remember what it feels like to be a learner yourself. I can share an example to kind of get you thinking about this. There's a picture of a hiker here. She's like up in the mountains, and I recently learned to go hiking. And it's one thing to learn doing something on your own. Maybe you're learning to bake a pie in your kitchen. It's a very different thing to be learning something while other people are watching you. So being out on a hiking trail and feeling like everyone else is really comfortable and knows exactly how to use their poles, I can tell you I felt really awkward. I felt like inept. I felt like, sometimes going up a hill, I was like breathing really hard and everyone else looked like it was so easy. So this was something that really challenged me. My question for you is, what comes to mind for you when you're trying to learn something new? What words would you describe that new experience? Go ahead and drop those in the chat. What words come to mind when you're trying to learn something new, especially if you're doing it in front of someone else? Well, these are really great words. Curious, you need trust, challenging, cold feet. I love that. That's great. Self-conscious, frustrated. Yeah, it's hard to feel like a beginner, really hard to feel like a beginner. So we have all these feelings already just from trying to learn something. Now, what if we add the lens of being at work in front of your coworkers or your boss? We're layering the feeling of peer pressure. We're laying in this concern of, is my boss going to judge me somehow? And then there's always the issue, if you're learning something, maybe you're learning something on a new system, is there a chance you're really going to screw something up? And you kind of feel like you might be putting your own reputation at risk, or even your identity a little bit. If you feel really confident and strong in what you do, but now you're doing something new and you don't look quite so strong, do you feel like even your identity at work is a little bit at risk? So yeah, I saw some of the words, you know, risky, feeling judged, absolutely. So I want us to really think about those learners that we're working with every day who are trying to learn lean. All of this emotional stew is happening as they're trying to learn these new ideas and concepts. So, all right. So let's think back. What does the research tell us about learning? You know, I think most people have seen this learning and development model. You know, 70% we learn best through experiences. There's 20% through social learning. And then 10%, just 10% comes from training in a structured course. So we know this is what the research says. And yet we get to work and it's like we throw all that research out the window and we feel like we really need to start everything we do with a class. Even though we know that's not really how people learn best. It's like, okay, we're going to do this new program. Let's roll out this massive class and get everybody into the class. And what happens then is we find ourselves with this. Here's a little comic. There's a woman, she's about to leave and she's talking to her dog and she says, I'm going out. Don't get into the trash while I'm gone. But what the dog hears is go get in the trash while gone. And I will tell you, this is often how I feel at the end of a training course. And I feel like I've explained everything beautifully, but then I'm looking at what everyone I just trained is trying to do. And it's like they've edited everything out like the dog. You know, they're doing something entirely different. And now I'm like, okay, this is not what I thought I taught them, but it's clearly the 10% that they took away. So let me hand this back over to John. He's got a little bit about his experience to share.
Thanks, Krista. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow in Scotland. So I'm going to talk about how me and my colleagues learned lean back in 2013. So whilst I've been involved in quite a lot of change projects across the organisation, lean was a relatively new concept to me back in 2013. So what was our learning experience like? Well, an external company came in to train us up, and that lasted for about 6 months, very intensive, and it was very structured, very disciplined. This is how you do it. Don't even think about varying from this approach. This is how you're going to do it. And to be fair, it was actually very good. It was a very good learning experience. It was learning by doing. So that bit was okay. The bit that wasn't quite as good from my perspective was the fact that it was too complicated for a university. But that's how we learned, that's what we were taught how to do it. So when this company left, we then started to apply our learning and share it with our colleagues across the organisation. And we got a lot of pushback. You know, it was too complicated, it was too intense, it was too structured, all that kind of stuff. So lots of feedback from people, a lot of pushback. So that was a challenge. You know, it was a challenge for us because we'd moved from being the learners to the educators to the teachers. And what we were doing was really just applying the methods and the tools that we were actually taught. So it was a challenge for us. In a sense, we had, and Krista may touch on this later, we were learning to ride a bike for those 6 months. And we had the stabilizers on the bike to keep us upright so we didn't fall off. And when the external company left, the stabilizers came off the bike and we had to learn very quickly. And we had to basically adapt or fail. So as I said, we needed to change, and we needed to change in a way that was appropriate for the culture of our organization. And so we did that, so one of the key things, and I'll touch a little bit on this later on, is for us, it was for me, it was my day job. This was my day job, so it was great. That complexity was okay for me. But for people we were educating and teaching lean, it wasn't their day job. They had, if you're working in finance, human resources, estates, they've got 1,000,001 things to think about. And we're trying to land lean on top of all that. So we needed to evolve. We needed to simplify it. So that's Strathclyde's story. I've also experienced something similar in other organizations where people do things like Six Sigma training, Lean Six Sigma training. I've experienced it myself many years ago, Lean Six Sigma training. I personally found it extremely complicated. And I'd give you sort of an analogy where everyone or most people will understand how to use Microsoft Excel in one way or another, hopefully. I'm looking at this audience. This audience is highly intelligent, very capable audience, so you'll all know how to use Microsoft Excel. What I think we were doing, or what I think quite a few organizations do, is we're teaching advanced Microsoft Excel to people who only need basic Microsoft Excel. And they only apply basic Microsoft Excel to do their job. So all of the teaching on advanced things, they're not using, they'll forget. So it's actually a waste of time and effort to teach all this complicated stuff. And don't get me wrong, some people need advanced Microsoft Excel, but not everyone. So you need to bear in mind what people need. What do they require as learners? So, Krista, could you move us on to the slide where we can challenge the audience, please?
Yeah.
I've explained some of the challenges that I've experienced. So the complexity, the delivering training that people weren't ready for. I remember one example where we delivered a lot of training to a particular area of the university, and the manager, this was back in 2013, the manager of that area said to me, "John, stop, enough. I've literally, I cannot take any more. You've taught me about daily huddles, you've taught me about standard work, you've taught me about 5S. I physically cannot absorb any more. Can you just give me a break?" So that was back to, we were pushing the training on people. They just weren't ready for it. So we needed to move from this push model to very much a pull model, where people were coming to us when they were ready for the training. So these were some of the challenges that we faced. We needed to adapt, as I said, and we have done and evolved and improved over the years, I would like to think. But with that example, what are some of the challenges that you've observed in your own organizations, other organizations? And if you would like to share some of them with us, that would be great. So what have we got? So we've got training needs analysis needed, absolutely. And that wasn't something that, again, we thought about doing at that time. It was very much a case of, this is how you do it. We were basically applying what we'd learned, and we didn't know any different. But it sounds so obvious now when you look back that that's what you should do. You should only be training what people actually need to know about, rather than me sitting on my or standing on top of my pedestal saying you will learn about this whether you like it or not. It sounds so, in a sense, arrogant, but that's what we were taught to do. It was crazy. Yep, over engineering, waste of time and effort. Yep. And absolutely, it's a really good point, Michael. Lower levels of buy-in going forwards. Absolutely, because people are disengaging, people are switching off. So if you're overloading them, that is absolutely a consequence of that. Learning should be fun, absolutely. Yeah, we do try and make it fun. Although some of my colleagues' jokes, I think, during training is leave a lot to be desired, but we do try and make it fun. Let me pick out a few more. Oh, Chris, thinking that the return on investment is in dollars rather than culture. Would you like to take yourself off mute, Chris, and just explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
Lean is a mindset. You will get efficiencies, but you can't, particularly when you're starting out, you can't say you've got to achieve savings straight away. I guess that's it in a nutshell. You know, it's cultural shift before it's a even a savings in time. Really, you build the savings as you spread the culture and you understand it.
Yeah, it's a good point, Chris, and I think I could talk for quite a long time. I won't do that just now, about the importance of purpose, of why you're doing it as well, to set that context at the outset. But that's another presentation for another time. But yeah, absolutely good point. And I think I saw another one there from Simon about bandwidth, and I think that's yeah, absolutely bang on. You know, it's back to that day job piece around people are so focused on the day job. If you're layering something very complex on top of that, they simply don't have the bandwidth to absorb and to apply the learning that you're giving them. You know, bandwidth, it's a really good word to describe that. Okay, some good stuff there. Krista, I think
I'll take it back.
I've already stolen your thunder with the bike and the stabilizer, so I'm going to pass it back to you.
It's all good. It's all good. All right, so we've talked about the emotional things that are going on. We've talked about some ideas of how training can go sideways. I'd like to take us back to what we can do to help with some of these challenges that we're facing. I'd really like to make the connection that the process of coaching someone is very similar to helping a child learn how to ride a bike. So just a quick show of hands. How many of you have helped a small child, like in this picture, learn how to ride a bike? Just anybody? I've got a few hands. Okay, fantastic. So let me take you back to that moment. Often when a child is first trying to get on the bike, they're very wobbly, and you're really almost holding the bike up while they're trying to sit on the bike, and they're trying to get their, figure out how to use the pedals properly, and then they're wobbling forward a little bit, and you're probably holding the back of the seat, trying to keep them stable, and you might have a hand on the child's shoulder, and you're just kind of rolling forward as they're learning how to do this. And then they're moving a little bit faster, and maybe now you're trotting behind them, and you just have your hand on the seat of the bike, or you're just kind of keeping them stable, and they're going faster and faster, and all of a sudden you're just able to take your hand off, and they're doing it. And now what are you doing? You're behind them, and you're shouting, "Go, you got it, you got this, keep going," right? And you're so excited, and they're so excited. And somehow in that moment, you're just following your instincts. You're so connected to that child. You're thinking about, what do they need? What do they need? And it's really a great moment. So let me tell you what I notice when we're not with a child and we're not like in the moment. I'd like to talk a little bit about this model. I think there's a really important shift in perspective out there that sometimes we're missing. And on one side of this balance, we've got teaching. And then the other side, we've got something that I just think of as helping to learn. And let me tell you the difference that I see in these two. I want to say early in my career, I feel like I was teaching. I was thinking so much about me. I was thinking, am I doing this right? Am I explaining these concepts correctly? Am I boring them? Like, am I moving the class along appropriately? Am I explaining this okay? All these things. It was all about me. I was not in the moment. I was not thinking about the learner. And gradually over time, I just started to shift more. I think I started thinking about what I was doing less, and I became more comfortable with it. And I really noticed that now I'm trying to think more of what's happening with the learner. I'm trying to be in the moment for them. Much as you're like in the moment when you're helping that child, think about that moment when you're helping a child learn. You're not thinking, the child isn't thinking, you're not teaching me correctly. You probably don't even know what you're doing. You know, your slides are terrible on this whole teaching how to ride a bike thing. No, they're not thinking that. Neither one of you is worrying about that. You're just in the moment, you're doing it. So I think what I'm trying to encourage everyone to work on is try to forget about you in this and focus more on what's happening with the learner at this moment. What do they need in this moment? Do they need that hand on the back of their bike to stabilize them as they're trying to figure out how to learn this stuff? So I guess as we keep talking about this, I want you to think about, where is your balance right now? Which side of this balance are you really on? And how can you help yourself get closer to that instinctive helping moment of giving the learner what they need?
Thanks, Krista. And just as you were talking, then it made me think about the last session I was actually in with some of you may have been there with Brad Newton, and linked to the sort of teaching and helping to learn thing. Ragda was talking about the concept of value, and she mentioned transactional value and transformational value, and it got me thinking about when we're delivering training sessions, if you like, workshops. For me and my colleagues, I think our focus is on the transformational value. We want to, build the capability of people to do wonderful things with Lean. To save lots of time, to improve the student experience, to do this transformational stuff. But for some of them, it may be more transactional. It may be that they want Lean training, or whatever you call it, on their CV, for example. They're not really interested in the transformational stuff. And I think from our side, I'm very focused on the transformational, and sometimes the two don't, if the two mindsets, if you like, there might be a bit of a clash there where you tend to get frustrated that people aren't doing the transformational stuff, but actually that's all they wanted. So I think we need to recognize what people actually want, and not everyone's the same, as well as how they learn, because how they learn will also not be the same. So it's complex, and that ties back to something I think in the chat earlier, if I can find it, yes, from Elena from Cambridge, about learners feeling role play. Totally agree. In my experience, I've seen a lot of people very fearful of role play, coming into a room. Oh, I hope there's not any role play, all that kind of thing. One thing that we did a few years back was, because we used to do role play but we introduced this thing called Teach Back. So we delivered the sessions, and so things like the 8 wastes of lean, the 5 principles of lean, those types of things. And we would ask people to think, okay, 8 wastes of lean. Come up with an innovative way of teaching the rest of the room about the 8 wastes of lean or the 5 principles of lean. We're not going to tell you how to do it. You get together in a group and basically just deliver a session on it back to us. And it worked. It works really, really well. And we've had some fantastic innovations of how to teach the 8 wastes of lean, for example, and 5 principles. There was one group who did it as a Christmas tree, believe it or not. But it was fantastic. It was just so engaging, so funny, and it really helped to embed the learning. But they didn't see it as role play. Part of it because we called it something else, but it was slightly different. So that worked really, really well. But that is an aside to this next slide in terms of why is this so important? And just to re-emphasize the point that this presentation has emerged through discussions between myself and Krista. So these are conversations based on us meeting up at a conference in Waterloo, I think it was, Krista, wasn't it, in 2015? A long time ago. But that, to me, demonstrates the importance of networking at these conferences and collaborating. So Krista and I have had ongoing conversations. We've shared our frustrations over the years about certain things and how we can do things better. And this presentation is really just us sharing our thoughts. And this slide is an example of that. So why do we think this is so important? And for me, I think personally, we still have a problem within the sort of wider lean HE community internationally. So it's not geographically specific. I think it is an international problem about the sustainability, the longevity of lean in higher education. There's many, many examples of organizations who have tried it, didn't work for whatever reason, stopped doing it and moved on to something else. And I've seen it time and time again. And I think we need to take a step back and think, why is that? And I think part of it, and again, it's just my personal view, is part of it is down because we are not evolving our approaches. We're not perceived to be adding value to our respective organizations. So we need to think more about why is that? And I think part of it does tie into the teaching, the learning, building capability of people across the organization. What value is attached to that, and how do we demonstrate that value to our leadership teams, for example? Because part of it may be down to a lack of awareness, a lack of knowledge of senior management. So how can the approaches that we're taking to supporting and coaching our teams help us sustain lean going forward? And I think part of it is demonstrating value, demonstrating culture change, raising awareness and training, and also things like aligning what we're doing to our strategy and values of the organization as well. So I just want to hang that out there just to get you to think about why, from your perspective, it's important. And linked to that, certainly in Strathclyde, I'm sure it's no different in your own organisations. People, and Steve mentioned this at early on yesterday. People are at the heart of what we do. I think that needs to be re-emphasised, and we work with people on lots of different activities. But if they're not successful, we're not successful. So our success, as the slide says, depends upon the success of the people that we're coaching. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we continue to do this better? And part of that, a very simple thing from my experience, is people are quite often reluctant. It's back to that, certainly in Scotland, I've observed people are very reluctant to celebrate their success, to shout about it. You know, there's a phrase, it probably doesn't translate very well internationally, but we call it hiding your light under a bushel. You don't want to shout about it. It's like, oh, it's nothing really. We need to make sure that people we are coaching, if they do something great, we need to help them showcase that, celebrate it, you know, shout from the rooftops, because that's part of sustaining this in the long term. It's that we do something, we do it really, really well, there's a positive impact, whatever that may be, we celebrate it, and it's that snowball effect. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But we need to remind ourselves that our success is their success. And I've already mentioned this earlier on. Lean is not their day job. There's a very complicated formula up there that I certainly don't understand. If anyone does understand it, please feel free to put it in chat. There are no prizes. So what do they need from us? And I think that's a key thing. And I touched on it briefly earlier on. One of the main lessons that I've learned, my colleagues have learned since 2013, and it continues to this day, we're continually evolving, hopefully improving our approach to how we deliver our training sessions, our workshops. One of the key lessons that we've learned is to keep it simple, to keep it as simple as possible. I think very often, and again, I've experienced this from external consultants, but also even teams internally in an organization, we make things so complicated that we're the only people that can do it. And that, to me, that's not the point at all, because ultimately you come in, you train somebody, you work with them on a project, and then you go away, and then they try and do it again themselves, and they think, how do we do that? Oh, we need to get that team back in again to help us. That, for me, that isn't success. Success for me is if you keep it simple, you work with colleagues to build their capability, they can apply that learning every single day to what they do quite easily, and it's self-sustaining. They don't need me anymore. They don't need my team anymore. Yes, they might want to learn about other things, but they can do it for themselves. So that is, for me, probably the number one lesson in all of this, that we need to keep it simple, because it's our day job, but it's not their day job. They've got, as I said earlier, 1,000,001 other things to contend with. And if we're layering something overly complex on top of that, they are either going to disengage, as somebody mentioned in the chat, or it's not going to sink in, and they won't be able to do it for themselves.
So I saw somebody mention in the chat whether, it's better to try to help them learn through an experience rather than in a classroom. And yes, 100% yes. We know that from research. It's always better to learn through an experience. So we're going to kind of give some of our advice from what we've observed and how our programs have evolved. So when you're helping them, you need to be encouraging. Think about it. If you're not excited about this kind of work, they're not going to be excited either. Don't give them too much at one time. Think back to that dog cartoon, right? You remember how the dog just kind of took the little snippets? You don't want to overwhelm them with information so that it all jumbles together completely. And then theory. I think you don't want to have too much theory. The less you can get away with to give them a baseline, I think the better off you are. They don't really care. They don't want a history lesson about the origins of lean. What they want is something that's going to help them make things on their team better. I can confess earlier in my career, when I was focused more on teaching and what I needed to provide than on helping them, I used a lot of theory. I felt like I wanted to pass along absolutely everything I'd ever learned. I thought this was going to help them if I could share absolutely everything I know. So they're going to have it all. But it was just so overwhelming. It was not what they needed. It was not the right thing at the right time. You know, if we think back to our child trying to learn to ride the bike, it's like trying to tell them everything they know to ride in the Tour de France. It's just not what they need. My thought on this is if they're really interested after some of these first exposures and experiences, they're going to come back and ask for more. It gets back to that pull system that John talked about. You want the learner to be pulling to say, I'm ready for the next thing. If you're pushing, it's never going to be as successful. And I appreciate a lot of people feel very strongly that they need to share that theory, but I feel like I've just learned over time that it's better if you wait for them to ask for it rather than push it forward. The other point I really want to make here is you can't learn for them. This gets back to our respect for the learner. They need the opportunity to work through this. They need the opportunity to try to learn this. Just because I've learned this doesn't mean that I can shortcut and try to jump them over that learning. There's only so much advice you can give. Think about that bike again. You've got to figure out how to balance. You've got to figure out how to use the brakes. I mean, there's no substitute for experience in learning how to do this. They need the space to experiment and learn for themselves. Anybody who's had a teenager can tell you this. It doesn't matter how much advice you try to give. They're just going to shut it off and they need to go learn for themselves, as they should. So if you've got to do a training class, if you can't come up with an experience, some other way to learn this, here's some thoughts on the materials. Don't use the lean jargon. Unless you're in a very technical environment, it's probably not going to fit your culture very well. I came from a more technical environment. I used to work in the auto industry. The jargon was a much better fit there than it is in higher ed. We found it can be a barrier for people joining. They don't know what it means. They don't feel welcome. We've heard other people say that at the conference. Sometimes I've even had people really bristle at when I say, oh, what does the customer need? They don't want to hear that term often. And some people can be very off-putting. One sponsor didn't want to work with us when we talked about, okay, let's define the problem. They found that really unpleasant, and they're like, we don't have a problem. Why are you talking about defining the problem? And it didn't matter how much we backtracked and tried to say, well, a problem is just a gap between where you are and where you want to be. It was too late. We had lost them, and we didn't have that opportunity to really connect and help them anymore. And again, remember, when they succeed, we succeed. So everything we can do to make this easier for them is going to help us in the long run. I love that opening when Simon Waller was talking about the friction and whether we're actually making it easy for people to engage in the desired behaviors. I feel like all the barriers we put up with our training material, it's just creating friction rather than making it easier for people to jump into this. So I also really love this quote. It's from Mark Twain. He says, if I had more time, I would have written less. And I really love that. And I can tell you, my team gets so frustrated with me on a regular basis when they're trying to put something together, or they're trying to write a report or recommendations for a group. And I push them, simplify it, take some of this out. it's still too much. Keep whittling it down. I feel so bad for them because I push on this so regularly, but it's really important. The more you can simplify the message, the better off the other person's going to be. When I think about materials, I would say anybody can Google lean content and paste it into a slide deck. It takes a lot more time and effort to distill it down into everyday language that they can easily internalize. So I would challenge you to think of yourself as the translator. You've done all the hard work to learn this material. Be their translator and take those hard concepts and make it easy for them to understand what they need to do and be able to start doing it. Don't just cut and paste. Like, you've got the time, make it easier for them.
Thanks, Krista. Just a couple of very quick things off the back of what you were saying there. When you mentioned the word problem, it obviously resonated very strongly in the chat. A few things coming through there. But I think the point I would kind of want to make on that, and a lot of great points coming through in the chat, something I mentioned earlier on about adapting to suit the culture of your organisation. One of the things I found is that language is very important. So certain words will not land particularly well in certain organisations. Just very simple example, we do training internally and externally. And what we call the course, some external organisations don't like it. So the content's exactly the same. They just want us to change the title because a certain word, like lean, for example, wouldn't land very well in that particular organisation. So we change it to continuous improvement and everything's fine. So language is a really important problem. Customer comes up quite a lot. So just adapt to something that suits. A very senior academic in my organisation doesn't like the word barriers, prefers, I think, challenges, and that links into opportunities. So that's coming through in the chat. So good discussion. I think an important point as well. So what happens when they get stuck? So yes, we need to remember to walk in their shoes, understand what's going on, help them, plan with them, break it down into small steps. I saw something yesterday where somebody was talking about how you can break big things down into small components. And the example was the challenges or the opportunity. We're going to walk 1 million steps this year. I mean, you see 1 million steps, think, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to walk 1 million steps in a year. That's impossible. But if you break it down per day, it's less than, I think, 3,000 or something like that. So it's, when you start thinking about things like that, it's achievable. So breaking it down, work with them to do that. Yes, be empathetic. To be perfectly honest with you, we don't necessarily have a problem getting people into workshops, into training rooms to learn about it. We don't have problems getting people through to the point where they've come up with an action plan, an improvement plan about this is what they're going to do. They've come up with it, they've created it. The problem we tend to find more than anything is at the point when they've got the action plan, then it comes back to, we've not got the time to implement it. It's back to, it's not their day job and they haven't got the time because this has happened. I've been asked to do this. This priority's landed that I wasn't expecting. So that's the biggest challenge. And I think, what can we do to try and get round that problem? I think in my experience, we've tried a couple of things where we need to do more work with the project sponsor because they potentially have the power, if that's the right word, to free up time for people. And also we've done something that introduced a control plan where before we even get to the action plan stage, we're thinking about what could get in the way of us being able to implement the action plan. What sort of things may come up in the future? And let's put things in place now mitigations in place now that will prevent those things from happening. So almost trying to look into the future about some of the problems. But certainly support them, be empathetic. Those are the key things, but people will get stuck, but we need to try and come up with ways in which to help them through that point when they are stuck. So what else can you do? Well, I wouldn't recommend doing that jump, that's one thing. But I mentioned this earlier on, we need to fit with our organisational culture. What we do at Strathclyde will not potentially work in the University of Michigan and vice versa. So we need to adapt and fit with our own organisational culture. Something as simple as, language, as I mentioned a second ago. I think we also need, and again, this is based on my own experience and observations, we need to align with the changing priorities and strategic goals of our departments, our organisation. I strongly believe that we need, at any given point in time, to be able to say, we have done this, we have achieved this, and this is how it contributes to the overarching goals. So we need to be seen to adding value. The other thing is, I think we also need to be on the lookout for new opportunities and not be, and I'll probably upset some people, but not be the sort of lean purists that, sorry, we can't do that because we only do lean. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. During the first COVID lockdown, as we'll all have experienced, everyone working, well, certainly most people working from home, that was very new for a lot of us, and people were very vulnerable. So one of the things we did as a team was we created a training course on effective team remote working, pretty much fairly quickly after lockdown, to support colleagues. Now, no one asked us to do it, we just did it, and it was a very well attended training course, and people felt very supportive. We also developed a training course on team-based innovation, but what we're trying to do is pretty much by stealth, getting people in to learning more about continuous improvement and lean, but focusing on other things that are very important to our organisation. So always looking out for new opportunities where you can add value to the organisation, and don't wait to be asked. You know, it's back to that. Don't ask permission, seek forgiveness. I'm a great believer in that. It sometimes comes back to hit me in the face, but you know, more often than not, it works well. And get your foot in the door, regardless if it's not really what you do. A big part of what we do is we get asked to facilitate workshops. And the workshops could be about anything, because there appears to be a lack of confidence, a lack of people feeling able to facilitate workshops well. So even if it's nothing to do with lean or continuous improvement, we will do it and then use that as an opportunity to develop relationships and then start doing other things with those parts of the organisation as well. So it's really, you know, trying to come at it from lots of different angles, but with this notion of, you know, starting to drip feed continuous improvement and lean into the various aspects of things that we do. So, as I've said a few times, this is Krista's and I's thoughts. We've shared them openly and willingly, and hopefully it's been of some interest to you. But we are really keen to get some idea of your perspectives, you know, based on the organisations that you've worked in, because we've not seen those. We don't know what those experiences have been like. So what insights and experiences would you be willing to share with us as we seek to learn from each other as a collaborative community? either in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and feel confident enough to do that, please do.
Sure, I'll share for a moment. A lot of what you guys have said resonates. I was just thinking about working outside of, you know, our normal boundaries. You guys mentioned facilitation, and that's something that we offer kind of as a service as well. I had a sponsor recently say, you know, I don't know what it is you do, but I'm always glad that you're here. So we always kind of tailor whatever service we're providing to fit that moment, whether it is that facilitation or, you know, having a little chat about maybe a lean topic, but not a full conversation or full training. It's just, oh, here's this thing that might be useful for this scenario.
Yeah, thanks, Candice. That's yeah, absolutely. I resonate with what you said as well, in terms of people. A lot of people don't really know what we do, but they've heard good things about what we do, and they want more of it. So yeah, there's a challenge there to, I guess, inform more. Back to this, I guess, celebrating success, but in making people more aware of what we do. My own principal, who's the head of the University of Strathclyde, he often calls me, John is my Lean Six Sigma black belt specialist, systems thinking. I'm like, no, I'm not. But if you think that, that's fine. But you know, so but it's that not quite 100% aware of everything that we do. But part of that is a challenge for us to showcase what we do better across the organisation. Ruth,
Elena
sorry.
from Cambridge. Oh, sorry, somebody else.
Right, no, you go, Elena, and then I'll come back to Ruth for a minute.
So just on sort of explaining what you do, I think recently we moved from one office to the next. So one funding program ended, our Cambridge, where we were process improvement analysts or process improvement lead with Linda, and we've just moved into the change and program management office as a team, and we decided, not formally but just informally, to change our role titles. So it's now continuous improvement lead and continuous improvement advisors, and actually not quite sure how that's landing yet, but for us it feels that that's, I think, more aligned with what we do, and isn't so sort of analysts, so I don't know. So yeah, it was just a sort of comment about trying to describe what you do and then going out there and facilitating things, because we are that sort of support, almost a sort of internal consultants for the organisation, and people come to us for advice and support and ask questions, which for me personally wasn't an analyst role. So putting ourselves out there is a different, has really helped, I think, in people understanding that, or hopefully it will.
I think it absolutely will, Elena. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to pass back to Krista. We've got a couple more slides, and we'll probably have time for one or two more questions.
Yeah. So just to wrap up again, this is a pretty famous quote. People will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So as you're going through all of this, however you approach it, hopefully in an experience, but if you're in training, just remember this is what they need to come away with. You know, they're going to take away 10% from a training. Let it be how they feel, and let them be excited about doing this kind of work. And then finally, this is kind of our closing advice: keep going. My boss, Pam Gable, this is her answer to me every time I start worrying, like, should I set targets? Should I do this or that? And she just says, just keep going, help them keep going. Because really that's how they're going to learn over time, just as I did, right? Over a career of learning how to do continuous improvement. So I always see my role as making a space for them, being available to them to help. I don't disappear after the workshop. We need to continue to be available, help create the culture where they can learn and thrive. And, you know, just our bottom line advice is keep going. When you think about that child, that's all we really ask of them on their bike. Just keep going, and they're going to get better as they go. So for us, we want to keep learning how to help others, keep evolving. And I really think I'm so grateful for all your comments. I think we are all getting better at this. And these conferences are a huge booster shot to help us keep going. So.
Absolutely, Krista, and keep learning from each other. Keep going, and we're pretty much on time, Krista. It's almost as if we rehearsed it. Thanks very much, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Did you want to take any questions from? I think there's a couple from the start. Did you want to take those, or did you want to wrap up? Okay, there was a question. Sorry, my chat is jumping around with all the comments. There was a question about is coaching, I'm paraphrasing, is coaching better than training? What they need differs per individual, so coaching is better than training?
Coaching is better than training, because coaching is really in the moment, working with the learner, helping them get exactly what they need. Training is more of a, you're giving something. It's not so much about what they need in the moment. You're deciding what they need. So coaching is very focused on where they are at that moment and what you need to help them with.
Great. And another question, do you ask learners after 1 or 2 years if they were able to use the what they learned, and if not, why? So then we know why it doesn't work.
In terms of, from my perspective, I think not as structurally or systematic as that, but I think it ties into something that was mentioned later on in the chat about communities of practice. So what we do have as a CI network, and when people come on to sessions, they become part of the network, so we can keep and we keep asking them, you know, what do they need, how are they getting on, and all that kind of stuff. So we do regular check-ins with that, but it's not as systematic as, you know, after a year or after 2 years. It's more regular touch points with them.
Great. There's a lot of comments, a lot of great feedback. I think those are the only questions that you haven't covered, unless anyone has any final question in the last minute. No. Lots of great thank yous. So great to see. Thank you so much to Krista and John for this presentation. Thanks to everyone who attended today. This brings us to the end of this session, and we hope to see you at the next ones. Bye for now.